Peace be with you. My name is Alan Kiesler, and we are having our second class today on the Institute of All Intelligent Life course, World Peace Without Armageddon. This is a very important topic, and those of you who heard the class 2 days ago are aware that it's a controversial topic also, because, as I mentioned in the last class, throughout the last thousands of years, really, people have looked forward to the time when there would be world peace on Earth, but people mostly have had the idea that that will only happen after a big war. So that is called Armageddon in the Christian tradition. It is also evidently referred to as Ghazva-i-Hind in the Islamic tradition. So I'm going to talk a little bit more today about Ghazva-i-Hind and try to correlate it with what we were saying in the last class. So the basic point I made in the last class was that in 1998 I had been taken to a place somewhere in the solar system off our planet, somewhere beyond the asteroid belt, I'm sure of that, between Jupiter and Saturn or somewhere in that region. And there was a large meeting going on, a conference of different extraterrestrial groups who were discussing whether the world war that was imminent in actually Pakistan and India, starting between India and Pakistan in 1999. So they decided, or the decision was made and announced at that meeting, that the war would be stopped, it would be prevented. And that war, I suggested in the last class when somebody asked the question, I hadn't really explored this issue in much depth before, but somebody asked, is this Ghazva-i-Hind, or when will Ghazva-i-Hind happen? And I said, my conclusion is that very likely that Ghazva-i-Hind was the war that was supposed to start in 1999. Or another possibility is that the Third World War was actually expected to start in 1984, at which time there was also a very close call in a war between India and Pakistan, which would have been started, if it had have happened, by an Israeli-Indian attack on Pakistan's nuclear facility in September of 1998. And that is a historical fact. That event happened just as Israel attacked the Iraqi nuclear facility in 1981. Similarly, an attack was launched in September of 1984 against Pakistan's atomic facility, I should say. But it was stopped and it did not happen. I'm not going to talk about that in detail now. But I'm just saying that either 1984 or 1999 was the start of, or the scheduled start, I should say, of Ghazva-i-Hind. But it did not develop into a hot war, but it has been going on, at least since 1999. There has been a war going on, which, in my opinion, is what was foretold as Ghazva-i-Hind. But it has not developed into a hot war. It's a cold war, or a propaganda war, or a psychological war, or a spiritual war. But it is going on right now, and has been going on for at least 18 years, if not for 25 years, or 23 years, since 1984, or about that time. So at least since the 1980s, or else since the end of the 1990s, Ghazva-i-Hind has been in progress, in my opinion. And I have been told, again, I've never researched this in great detail, but I've been told that that Ghazva-i-Hind would last for 40 years. so I don't know. I do need to research that further, but my understanding is that if that would last 40 years, from either 1999 it would go till 2039, or from 1884 it would go to 2024. So 2024 is not that far away. It's only 6 years now. Or 2039 is just 22 years from now. So this conflict, which was prophesied, without any doubt, there are hadiths, there are traditions that the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had foretold that at some date in the future there would be a Ghazva-i-Hind. And as we discussed day before yesterday again, Ghazva means a battle led by the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, himself. There were many wars and many battles that were fought at the time of the Holy Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and only those wars which he personally led were called Ghazwa. So it's very, very interesting that this battle has also been called Ghazva-i-Hind. It means that in some sense this war will be led by, or will be spiritually guided by, the Holy Prophet himself, peace be upon him. So there are undoubtedly many mysteries and many things that are not clear about this, but my conclusion, I'm not claiming I must be right, but my conclusion is that this Ghazva-i-Hind, just like the Armageddon battle foretold by Christian mystics and seers and many, many different individuals, both of them were destined to take place. Those prophecies were not wrong by any means, they were correct, but that destiny has been changed. So those wars, or that war, will not take place as a nuclear war or as a catastrophe on the military level, but it will take place as a spiritual war, or a psychological war, a war of minds or a war of souls, in which the same basic prophecy that was there will happen, but without a hot battle. Or there may be skirmishes. I'm not saying that the militaries of Pakistan and other countries that are preparing for Ghazwa-i-Hind should not be ready. No, it is very important that the legitimate military forces of Pakistan and of all areas, all regions in not only in the subcontinent of South Asia, but throughout the world, the good military people must be prepared at every moment for any conflict. But my understanding is that it will not develop into a wide open war with nuclear weapons especially. So I just happened to see a comment or question by Mohsin Mubarak, when will the war start? So perhaps you joined after I made that suggestion that this Ghazwa-i-Hind may have started in the 1980s, by 1984, or it may have started in the 1990s, by 1999. Those two dates, 1984 and 1999, were specifically foretold by different mystics and psychics and spiritual seers to be the start of the final war, or a major worldwide war. So both those dates have passed. So that doesn't mean those prophecies were wrong, but it means that they were changed. Actually, the war between Iraq and Iran, which lasted from the early 1980s through the middle 1980s, or later 1980s, about 1981 to 1987, that, in my opinion, was the Third World War reduced. In other words, there were prophecies that this war would take place in South and West Asia, or it would be started there or centered there. So I believe that what we experienced as the Iran-Iraq War, in which millions of people were killed, and in which I know Iraq at least used horrible weapons, including chemical warfare, and Iraq ran up billions of dollars debt because of that war. So it was actually a much bigger war than we may realize today. So that, in my opinion, was the start of what we could call World War III, which was reduced from a world war to the conflict centered in Iran and Iraq. And the Third World War was that one. The next World War, which could have been called the Third World War since the Third World War never happened, or the Fourth World War, was destined to start. And I'm quite sure about this. The exact date was given both by Nostradamus, the famous European French seer, who predicted many events. He lived hundreds of years ago, and he foresaw many happenings, just like the world wars in the 20th century, First and Second World Wars. He also predicted in the 7th month of 1999 a great war would start, or at least he said, I think the exact words, that there would be a terror from the sky, which sounds very much like a nuclear attack. In any case, and I believe that he specifically foretold that New York City would be attacked in that way. So that war was also prevented. It almost started, again, between India and Pakistan, the Kargil War, but it did not expand into the World War as it had been prophesied, as it had been expected, and as it indeed had been destined. And so I want to stress that none of those prophecies were wrong, but they were changed. Not that we could change them, but God is able to change. After all, God is the one who sets destiny. So if he sets the destiny, he can also change it. I don't think any reasonable person who has some correct understanding about the nature of God could deny that God has that ability to change destiny. So I believe that is what happened. So when did the war start? Or you asked Mohsin Mubarakji, when will the war start? I believe it already has started and has been going on for at least 18 years already, since 1999, if not for 20, or how many years would it be? 84, 16 plus 17, 33 years. So this Ghazva-i-Hind, I'm going to end now with this statement. The Ghazva-i-Hind, I'm quite convinced, is going on right now, and we are seeing it happening. There is some military conflict also going on. Terrorist acts are part of that world war. Not world war, but that Ghazva-i-Hind, which it really is a world war, but it's not a hot world war. And the real war is not between India and Pakistan. The real war is between the satanic forces, which unfortunately have allied themselves with reactionary forces in India, Hindutva forces, we call them, fundamentalist Hindus. They're not really Hindus, in my opinion. They call themselves Hindus, but they should be called Hindutva forces, just like there are Muslims and there are Islamist terrorists. So there are two different groups. One is the good people, and one is the satanic people. So the satanic people are represented especially by the Cabal, the so-called Illuminati. They actually are Satanists. They really worship Satan, and they do horrible sacrifices even of children in their rituals. So they have allies in many countries of the world. They have taken over governments of many countries in the world, and not only in the United States and Europe and Israel, but in many countries. These satanic people, these very, very selfish, evil people who want to create a world government under their control to rule the whole world. That's their plan. They're called Zionists because they want their capital city to be on Mount Zion in Jerusalem, where the Holy Mosque, Al-Aqsa Mosque, is located. So that's there in prophecies from different traditions, from both Islamic and Christian traditions and Jewish traditions. They have some idea there too. So this is my understanding that this Ghazva-i-Hind, which actually in the prophecies, the Islamic prophecies about Ghazva-i-Hind, they say specifically that the fighters of Ghazva-i-Hind in South Asia, in India and Pakistan, that they would return to Sham, to Syria, and there they would meet the forces of Isa alayhi salam, that is, the returned Jesus. So those details are difficult to understand. For me, they're very difficult to understand. I don't know exactly how that will play out or what exactly that means, but I am aware that there are such prophecies. So I believe that Ghazva-i-Hind is already going on for a number of years, and it will play out as it was predicted, but with the major difference that it won't be that open military conflict, but it will be more of a spiritual war. All right. I'm going to go back and see now from the beginning what comments and questions we may have. Masood Alam, sir, being Muslim, why didn't you change your name? I do have a Muslim name, was given to me, Ali. I am called often Babaji Ali. But I'm not only a Muslim, I'm also a Christian. I believe in all the religions of the world, so I don't think it's necessary to use only my Muslim name. I found it more beneficial to use the name that I was given at birth by my parents, because I never rejected Christianity. When I accepted Islam, when I accepted all the religions of the world, I didn't reject Christianity. I believe in all religions, so I find no benefit or need for me to change my name officially, legally, to Ali, although my Muslim friends often call me that, and that is my name too. All right, let's see. Mohsin Mubarak says, no, dear sir, Ghazwa-i-Hind was started even in 1875. Jang-i-Azadi, every soldier is a martyr of Ghazwa-i-Hind. Well, I won't deny that. That's also very possible, that the Ghazwa-i-Hind started in 1875. Like I mentioned, there was some prophecy made that it would last for 40 years. If that's the case, it finished long ago, if it started in 1875. So it is open to different interpretations, but I don't know. Myself, I suggested 1984 or 1999. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it hasn't started yet. I'm not saying that as an absolute truth, but that's just my understanding. Partha Satyadev, what Ghazwa-i-Hind, stupid verses of stupid hadiths. Well, of course the Indians don't like the predictions of Ghazwa-i-Hind, because they state very clearly that that India would be conquered by the forces under the direction of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So most Muslims understand that would be Muslim armies conquering India. I personally, as I said earlier, I don't think of it in those terms. I don't think of it as a war between Pakistan and India. I consider it a conflict between the true forces of purity and goodness, love and harmony, which is pure Islam, and the satanic forces of the entire planet, which have gotten a foothold in India. Very sad to say that, as we have seen, many of the terrorist acts in India that have happened for many decades now, and which have been blamed on Muslims, they were actually organized by secret agencies within India, Hindutva agencies, allied with RAW, that is the Indian intelligence agency, allied with the Israeli intelligence agency, Mossad, and allied with the CIA, the American intelligence agency. So those three agencies, and perhaps some European agencies also participated, but at least those three agencies were involved in these terrorist acts in India, like in Bombay and in Delhi. Attack on the Indian Parliament, I think it was 1971, and a number, not only 3 or 4, dozens or even hundreds of terrorist attacks in India, which were blamed on Muslims, were actually false flags carried out by Indian Hindutva radicals, terrorists, aided by and guided by and funded by and armed by Israel and the United States secret agencies. So, Parth Sachadevji, I hope you won't be offended by that, but you investigate, look into it yourself. If you study carefully, you will see that these were not attacks carried out by Muslims or organized by Muslims. Some Muslims were used as patsies, as we say in English. That is, they were tricked into appearing to be engaging in these terrorist acts, some of them, but they were really carried out by the Hindutva agencies allied with the Zionist agencies from Israel and the United States. So this Ghazva-i-Hind, in my opinion, has been going on for a number of years or even decades. So it's definitely not stupid verses of stupid hadiths. These are very, very insightful and prophetic verses. It's just that the overall understanding of those prophecies needs to be adjusted because things have been changed. But those prophecies are there, and many of them are very clear. Masood Alam says, I don't think Allah changed his decision. It's because we predicted wrong. Well, okay, you can hold that opinion also. I have no objection to that. I could be wrong. I don't think Allah could be wrong. God is not wrong, but He can change His mind. So it could be either that those predictions were misunderstood by us, or we made some wrong predictions, but there's no reason why Allah could not change His decision. I don't think we should hold that opinion that Allah cannot change His mind. Why not? You think He cannot? Why not? Umar Farooq gives his email address and asks me to contact him. Okay, I will email you. And Parth Sachdev again. What Hindus have done to Muslims? Muslims have a long history of genocide of Hindus, destroying temples and all. Well, what have Hindus done to Muslims? Unfortunately, it's very, very sad but true that on both sides, perhaps 1 million Muslims were killed by Hindus, perhaps 1 million Hindus were killed by Muslims in 1947 during the partition of India and the creation of Pakistan. So certainly both sides have engaged in may not be genocide, because I don't know how organized it was. If anything, it was the organization or planning was by the British to create this chaos and this. But I don't think Hindus or Muslims engaged in genocide intentionally, planned out. But both sides engaged in tremendous slaughter because of the fire of animosity, the hatred that had been engendered and built up, in my opinion, by the British, or other forces also. But there is certainly a long history of both sides in South Asia, both Hindus and Muslims attacking and killing thousands and even hundreds of thousands, if not more, innocent people of the opposite faith. Very, very sad history, and Parth Sachdev says, Islam is the religion of peace. Ha ha ha, world is seeing how much peace Islam is spreading. Actually, that's not a joke. Islam is the religion of peace. Islam means peace. Salamti means peace and prosperity also, and kindness and being welcome. So Islam is really the religion of peace. It really is. I know there are Christian propagandists that are denying that, but it's exactly what the word means. So what is happening in the world today in the name of Islamic terrorism is not Islamic. It is anti-Islamic. Islamic. It is very clearly against the teachings of Islam, the teachings of the Holy Prophet of Islam, the teachings of the early followers of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him. Those teachings are really that terrorism is illegal. It's sinful. No one is allowed by Islamic law to kill an innocent person, which includes not only women and children and old people, but even businessmen, merchants, monks, full-grown men who are not warriors, who are not fighters in the war. They cannot be attacked and killed according to Islamic law. So terrorism is clearly contrary to Islam. So what is happening in the world today, the so-called Islamic terrorism, it's not Islamic, it's anti-Islamic terrorism. And I agree completely with President Putin of Russia, who has stated recently, last year I think he made this comment, that 95% of all the terrorist acts in the world are actually being carried out by the CIA, not by Muslim terrorists. These are all false flags, just like perhaps the biggest, most famous one is 9/11, which the CIA, the secret government in America, organized, especially the Vice President Dick Cheney was the chief organizer of that horrible event, or events of that day, September 11th, 2001. They blamed it on Osama bin Laden, which was totally ridiculous. Osama bin Laden, sitting in a cave in Afghanistan, could never have orchestrated those attacks on the Pentagon. Impossible. Especially when we see that the claim that the Pentagon was attacked by a passenger airplane is totally false, because the hole that was created in the Pentagon by that attack was much smaller than the airplane of that size would have created. So it was actually a military missile, a United States military missile. All right, so I think that I'm going to have to plug in my charger here, because I just got a message that my battery has gone low. So all these terrorist acts that we see in the world today, not beginning with 9/11, but that was the most important one, then 1971, I'm trying to remember the name of that plane now, an Indian Airlines plane was hijacked and blamed on Muslim terrorists. They were actually agents of the Satanists. They weren't Pakistani Muslims, they weren't Indian Muslims, they were agents. That whole hijacking was created by the Indian forces in order to give an excuse for closing Indian airspace to Pakistan, because the war in Bangladesh was starting. India was well aware that a war is going to be happening. They were actively promoting it, and so they wanted an excuse to close Indian airspace to Pakistan so that Pakistan could not fly over to Bangladesh, or to Bengal at that time, West Pakistan, East Pakistan at that time. So they created that terrorist act and blamed it on Muslims. So this was only the first. Then, I'm sorry, I had the wrong date before for the attack on the parliament, in Indian parliament. I'm sorry, it's slipping my mind right now, but there was a famous attack on the Indian parliament blamed on Muslim terrorists, specifically Kashmiri terrorists, but that was also organized by the Indian intelligence agency. There are different intelligence agencies in India. So I'm trying to remember the name of that one group. It's I can't remember it right now, but there was one group, an intelligence agency, which was controlled by Hindutva fanatics, who consider themselves Hindus, but I don't consider them Hindus, because they are just as anti-Hindu as the Islamic terrorists are anti-Islamic. So anyway, those events, those terrorist acts all around the world are not, Parth Sachdevji, forgive me, they're not being spread by Islam, the religion of peace. They're being spread by the Satanists the Zionists, the enemies of truth and goodness, enemies of Islam, enemies of Christianity, enemies of Hinduism, enemies of Buddhism. They are the enemies of all true religions. So that's what's spreading this terror in the world, not Islam. I'm sorry if you have that impression. All right, Parth Sachdev. Now, who killed Imam Hussein? Were they Hindus? Muslims killed Muslims. Have you heard about Brahmani Husseins? Hindus of Hindustan went to Karbala and they fight for Imam Hussein. And in return, they want to occupy India. All right, so this is an important issue. It is certainly true that Imam Hussein was killed by persons who called themselves Muslims. And throughout Muslim history, there has been a conflict and understanding who those people were. Should they have been called Muslims? Because what they did was totally against Islam. Anyone, it makes no difference, Shia or Sunni or this or that, or Muslim or non-Muslim, anyone who studies Imam Hussein's martyrdom, his heart will be pierced by horror at what the horrible treatment of Imam Hussein and his family and his followers. The people who attacked them and killed them may have been called Muslims, but in my opinion, they were not Muslims. They were against true Islam. They were enemies of true Islam. So you may call, for example, the Christian the Christian Church, when it committed horrible acts of persecution and atrocity against people who they considered heretics in Christianity. You may consider them Christian, people may call them Christian, but I don't. They were definitely against the teachings of Jesus. So, who killed Imam Hussein? They were, of course, not Hindus. They were Arabs, yes, who considered themselves Muslims, but they were not Muslims. They were Satanists. They were followers of evil. They were servants of evil, not of goodness. And Islam definitely teaches truth and peace, goodness and love. So those people that attacked Imam Hussein very, very deceitfully, it is horrible, the story, you are familiar with it, you can just read about it more. Anyone who reads about that will understand that those people who killed him and his 70 followers, they were anti-Islamic, just as anti-Islamic as the terrorists in the world today who call themselves Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. No, they're anti-Islamic State. And actually, it's now being exposed that ISIS was also created by the Western intelligence agencies. So, of course, we can't say the Western intelligence agencies created the enemies of Imam Hussein, but the Satanists were responsible for those developments in Syria at that time. Those people who opposed Imam Hussein were definitely under the evil influence. So, all right, okay, Parth Sachdev has some more comments. Oh really, what a joke. How many people Hindutva killed? Is Hindutva also present in Syria, Libya, Iraq? What a joke, man. You are making just fool of yourself. No, I never said that the Hindutva Vadis were in Syria or Libya or Iraq. The Zionists, the Christian and Jewish Zionists, definitely are there in Iraq and Syria. The Libyan forces, so-called freedom fighters that were fighting against Gaddafi, they were funded by, armed by the Christian and Jewish Zionists. They weren't, they may have called themselves Muslims, but they were funded not by Hindus. I never said Hindutvavadis were there. No. But definitely in India over the last several decades, many Muslims have been killed. Thousands of Muslims were killed in Gujarat. And because of that event, when Modi, now the Prime Minister, he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat, and because he let that happen, exactly what his role was in it has not been cleared up, but he definitely was considered responsible by the United States at least, and he was banned from getting a visa to the United States for many years, until he became the prime minister, because of that false flag created in Gujarat, as the result of which thousands of Muslims were killed by Hindutva-vadis. Yes, they were not Hindus, no. They were Hindutva terrorists. Okay, so be careful. I'm not a fool. I know what I'm talking about. And you made a foolish assumption that I was saying that Hindutva-vadis were behind Syria, Libya, and Iraq. No, I never said that. All right. Malik Amin Sahar, can you please describe name of Muslim forces commander anyway? I don't know how I could answer that. I don't quite understand your question. Which Muslim forces commander you're referring to? All right, Parth Sachdevji again. Thousands of Islamic terrorist organizations, and Hindutva is problem. How many people Hindutva killed? I just told you. Thousands of people. This is not my opinion. This is history. Everyone knows it. Now the Hindutva-vadis pretend that the Muslims were responsible. But no, there was some attack on a train of Hindu pilgrims, and as a result, that was blamed on Muslims. In my opinion, Muslims did not do it. It was done by Hindutva-vadis, but it was a false flag in order to get the Hindu people riled up against the Muslims so that they would kill thousands of Muslims. It was an attempt to frighten Muslims and drive Muslims away from India, or to subjugate them and make them fearful. So that was just one incident, one of the worst incidents in Indian history since 1947, or since the wars of the 1940s and 50s and 60s. But this horrible attack on thousands and thousands of Muslims, innocent children, women, Muslim homes were burned, entire neighborhoods of Muslims were destroyed. So that these Islamic organizations that engage in terror, they're not Islamic. I'm saying it again and again. They are anti-Islamic. They are against the real teachings of Islam. Just like Hindutva-vadis are doing things that are against the real teachings of the Hindu faith. Christian terrorists have been doing things, and Christian religious leaders also in religious organizations have been involved in terrorist acts or horrible acts of persecution that had resulted in thousands and even millions of deaths. They're not Christian. They're anti-Christian. They may call themselves and may even think of themselves as Christian. These Islamic groups may think of themselves as Muslims, but they're not. They're anti-Islamic. They're anti-Muslim. All right, Sardar Ravinder Singh Ji. Hello, sir. How are you? I pray for you. To God bless you. Sat Sri Akal, Sardar Ji. Thank you very much for your prayers, and may God bless you also. I have in the past talked about the importance of the Sikh religion, the Khalsa, because Khalistan means the land of the pure, just as Pakistan means the land of the pure. So I believe that not only in Pakistan, but in Khalistan also, among the Sikh Khalsa, there will be a great movement of truth and love and purity, which will reestablish a true religion in the world, true dharma, and the true Khalsa, which is not limited to Sikhs. All pure-hearted people of whatever religious affiliation, they are in the Khalsa. So I look forward to that also happening, that the Sikh Khalsa and the Pakistani Pak Log, the pure people of Pakistan and the pure people of Khalistan will join together and fight together for truth and purity, love and harmony. All right, Parth Sachdev, leave that genocide. What before that? I have Hindus went to Saudi Arabia to occupy it, or was it Islamists who occupied the entire Indian subcontinent? You are saying Islam is peace. I am not saying Islam is peace. The word Islam means peace. So Islam is peace. If Islamists, who are just like Hindutvavadis, they are people who call themselves Muslims but are acting in ways contrary to Islam. Just like the Hindutvavadis are people who call themselves Hindus but are acting contrary to the true teachings of the Hindu Dharma. They are not Muslims, in my opinion, those Islamists. Just like the Hindutvavadis are not Hindus. So Islam is peace. The word Islam means peace. That was the purpose of the Holy Prophet's entire life, was to end the conflict. You know, Arabia at the time of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, was in constant state of war. Tribes were all fighting against each other, killing each other, you know, and there were going on for generations, for hundreds of years. And when the Holy Prophet came, he established peace. He established cooperation and even love between all those tribes which for centuries or millennia had been enemies at each other's throats. So Islam definitely brought peace in the time of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him. So, yes, Islam means peace. Part Sachdev, who killed Sikh gurus? Who made their small children martyred? Go through the history, you will come to know. Yes, in fact, you may be interested to know that I have been telling Muslims in Pakistan exactly this point. I told them, study the history of the Sikh gurus. You will see that their enemies, so-called Muslims, were actually not Muslims. They were the evil ones. The Sikh gurus were the real Muslims. They were the real lovers of peace and truth. And Guru Gobindji, in fact, at the end of the conflict between the Sikh gurus and the Muslim rulers, he wanted to meet Aurangzeb. He had actually gone. He had been, of course, tricked, lied to, not only by Muslims. They were Hindu, the hill rajas, the kings of the Hindu kingdoms in the hills surrounding the area where Guru Gobind Singh Ji and his followers were located. They lied and they said, we will let you go freely if you know, there were certain conditions. So Guru Gobind Ji fulfilled his conditions, but the other side attacked them. So they were Hindus and Muslims who were evil, satanic people. And Guru Gobind Singh Ji escaped, and he headed towards South India to try to meet Aurangzeb. That would have been a very interesting meeting if that had happened, because they were both Aurangzeb and Guru Gobind Singh were incredible military generals, as well as, what should I say, not ordinary human beings. They both had great dedication to their cause. So I wish they would have met, and we may have seen a very different history in India. So yes, I am well aware that the people who killed the Sikh gurus and their children, they were people who, some of them were people who called themselves Muslims, some of them were people who called themselves Hindus, but they weren't Muslims or Hindus. They were evil people, anti-religious people. And the Sikh gurus were pure. They were Pakistanis, they were pure Muslims, they were Khalistanis. They were the real, true, I could say pure Hindus too. They were the real followers of the Sanatan Dharma. So yes, you were right, that the people who killed the Sikh gurus were horrible people. And some of them were Muslims, thought themselves were Muslims, but they weren't really Muslims. Some of them were Hindus, don't forget that there were Hindus who were also against the Sikh gurus, and they weren't real Hindus either. All right, we've really gone on a long time on this topic. Again, Parth Sachdev Ji is saying, don't make fool of yourself. Pakistani army raped thousands of Bengali women in 1971. Parth Sachdev Ji, you are the one who have been fooled by false propaganda. I hate to tell you this, because I'm sure you totally believe you have swallowed up the propaganda about what had really happened in 1971. In 1971, there were very few, not thousands even. There may have been a few hundred, or there may have been even less than that. The Pakistani army did not rape thousands of Bengali women. That's a lie. Forgive me if I'm offending you, but that is not the truth. You need to study the history more carefully. There were many, many totally false stories that were spread by the Bangladeshi liberation fighters. They were actually promoting their own agenda by these false stories they spread. There may have been a few, and the Pakistani army punished those Pakistani soldiers who were acting against the codes of the Pakistani military. Pakistani military has always been a very strict and well-disciplined army, and it was also in 1971. And all these stories that you have evidently believed blindly, because you have not studied them or you would see they're false, about Pakistani army raping thousands of Bengali women in 1971. No, that is not the truth. Hindus went to rescue. Well, the Indian, and this has been acknowledged also by Indian authorities, that the Indian army went in and had been supporting and funding the Mukti Bahini, the so-called Bengali freedom fighters. The Indian army was fully involved in that from long before these stories were manufactured about Pakistani army raping thousands of Bengali women. That is not what happened. You need to read more carefully, study more carefully. Don't just believe blindly what you've been told by your sources. Study those sources more carefully. They were very, very twisted. They had their own agendas, and these figures have been totally exaggerated, tens, hundreds of times, thousands maybe. What really happened? Don't call me a fool. I know. I've studied this all very carefully from both sides, and I know that this is a huge exaggeration. What you are, you're the fool if you believe them. Umar Farooq, Jaish-e-Mohammed is attack Indian parliament. Jaish-e-Mohammed and all of these terrorist groups, they are actually funded by, backed by, organized by Zionists. Even ISIS, even Al-Qaeda, even the Taliban, they were all promoted by, I shouldn't say Taliban, I should say the jihadis in Afghanistan. They were all funded by the CIA and by Zionist organizations. So Jaish-e-Mohammed, if you need to read, what's the name of that? The Strange Story of the Attack on the Indian Parliament, I believe is the name of that article. Let me see if I can remember her name. An Indian lady, right now it's slipping my mind, had written, but I'm quite sure the name of that article, if you do a search for it, I could actually do it right now probably on Google or any of the internet search engines. You just do a search for the strange story of the attack on the Indian Parliament. I'm doing it right now myself. Strange story of Indian Parliament. Attack. All right, let's see if it will come up. Yes, here it is, by Arundhati Roy, a Hindu lady, an extremely intelligent person. She has written this book, not a book, I think, an article rather, The Very Strange Story of the Attack on the Indian Parliament on December 13th, 2001. So that attack was not actually carried out by a Muslim terrorist organization. They were blamed, Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Taiba were blamed for it. But actually, if you read Arundhati Roy's article, you will understand that that attack was organized by Hindutvavadis. The police were involved in inducing the Kashmiri youth to become what we call patsies. It means a person who is put up to do something. He's not really doing it, but they make it seem like he did it. So I'm trying to remember the name. Muhammad Afzal was the Kashmiri young man who was tricked into going to Delhi and participating. He was forced, actually. He was threatened that if he didn't do it, what would happen to him and his family. So you need to read that article. Again, just do your own search for the Arundhati Roy, Arundhati Roy, Arundhati Roy, Strange Story of the Attack on the Indian Parliament. And if you read that carefully, which I have done actually 2 or 3 times, I've gone through the whole thing. It's a fairly long article. But if you read that, you will be able to understand that what I'm saying is true. It was not Jaish-e-Mohammed. It was not a Muslim terrorist organization. It was the Indian agencies behind it. They wanted to create an excuse for creating a confrontation with Pakistan. And they did. Immediately after that, the Indian military had huge forces on the Pakistan border. So that was also a false flag attack. By these false flags, we mean events that have been staged to look like the opposite of what they really are. So what you have to understand, what was the purpose of the people who did that? Muhammad Afzal and his co-conspirators, as they're called, they had nothing to benefit from this. Who benefited from it? The Indian secret agencies, who were trying to create a confrontation with Pakistan and trying to isolate Pakistan and trying to blame Pakistan for these terrorist acts. So this you need to study carefully, because there's huge propaganda machine, not only in India, all over the world. There is a huge propaganda machine run by the Zionists, run by the deep state is now the term that has become popular. That means the secret government, behind the American government, behind the European governments, behind the Israeli government. These are very, very evil people, Satanists, and they are doing things like this attack on the Indian Parliament and blaming them on Muslims. Okay, Part such days. I will talk to you in person later. We'll discuss about Ghazva-i-Hind. Okay, I will be happy to do that. All right. We're getting close to an hour, so our time is almost up. Part such day goes on. Okay, I'll keep reading your comments since we can get these things cleared up. I hope you've gotten some of the things cleared up about the terror attacks in India done by the Indian Hindutva agencies, not by Muslims. According to you, Muslims are the most innocent people on the earth, planning to kill Hindus, thinking of Ghazva-i-Hind, still they are peaceful. No, I never said that the Muslims are the most innocent people on earth. I just said a few minutes ago, half an hour ago, that Muslims killed perhaps 1 million Hindus in 1947. So that was horrible. And Hindus killed perhaps 1 million Muslims in 1947. So I never said Muslims are the most innocent people. What I said was the real Muslims are peace-loving. True Islam is the religion of peace. True Hindus are peace-loving too. And the Hindutvavadi terrorists who also speak of, driving out the Muslims and forcing them to revert to Hinduism. There are Hindutvadis who say things like that. They're not real Hindus either, just like the Islamist terrorists are not real Muslims. So I never said Muslims are the most innocent people on earth. They are also guilty of many crimes. And so-called Muslims, I would say. Real Muslims, just like real Hindus and real Christians, are innocent. They don't engage in these terrorist acts and these murderous plots. All right, Partsachadev, haha, everything is done by Hindutvavadi. Wow. Not everything, But most of the terrorist acts in India have been done by Hindutvavadis. You need to read this. You need to study it carefully. Just like most of the terrorist acts all over the world have not been done by Muslims, they've been done by CIA agents. Many of them are so-called Muslims, but they're really, as President Putin, you can look that up. I'm sure if you do a search, you can find that statement by President Putin of Russia also, that 95% of the terrorist acts in the world today are done by the CIA. So that was his statement. So not done by Hindutvavadis. I never said Hindutvavadis were doing all that. But most of the terrorist acts in India over the last several decades, at least, they have been by Hindutvavadis. Who killed Gandhiji? A Hindutvavadi. All right. Malik Amin Sahar, I mean commander of Ghazva-i-Hind force. Yes, again, I don't know who that might be. Or Parth Sachdev, 2002 riots happened just because of Godhra riots when Hindus were burnt alive. Some Hindus made their country democratic, Muslim population rise in India from 4% to 25%, and in the same time, Hindu population in Pakistan was 23%, now it is not even 2%. So, unfortunately, Parth Sachdev ji, for you have touched on a topic that I know a lot about because I've studied this. And yes, those 2002 riots happened because of false flags. Hindus were burnt alive. That was triggered by Hindutvavadis, not by Muslims. The people behind it were the Hindutvavadis. They wanted that. It was a false flag. They wanted that to happen just so they would have an excuse to get the Hindus all riled up against Muslims, to kill thousands of them. Their plan has always been, and you can study this yourself, it's not something I'm saying from the time of Savarkar 100 years ago and more. These Hindutvavadis have been openly saying that Hindustan is for Hindus, and the Muslims should either become Hindus again or leave the country. They want to drive them out. So that was the agenda that was behind those 2002 riots in Gujarat. So you need to study that carefully. I have studied it very carefully. And as far as the Muslim population in India rise from 4% to 25%, and Hindu population in Pakistan from 23% to 2%, well, the population of Hindus in Pakistan is about 2%, yes. Maybe a little more, but maybe a little less. This population of 23%, that was including West and East Pakistan together. From 1947, the population of Hindus in West Pakistan has been not more than a few percent. So that you are including East Pakistan in that figure of 23%. So that is very, very misleading. All right, I think our time is up. So I'll take one or two more questions. Muhammad Osama, but are you a Muslim, sir? Yes, I am a Muslim. I am also a Christian. I am also a Hindu. I am also a Buddhist. I believe that all of these religions really are part of one deen. All these mazhabs, all these faiths, or whatever English term you want to use for mazhab, they are parts of the one eternal deen. Whether you call it Islam, or you call it Sanatan Dharam, you may call it whatever you want, but there is only one true religion, and that religion is love. Love of God, love of humanity, service of God, service of others, kindness, truthfulness, justice, friendliness. All of these are the signs of true religion. And whoever from whatever so-called faith may identify themselves as, they are real followers of the deen, of the eternal religion, if they are truthful, if they are kind and helpful to others and loving to all, if they stand up for justice and protection, especially of poor and weaker people. That is real Islam. That is real Christianity. That is real Hinduism, real Buddhism, real Sikhism, the real Khalsa. So this is, yes, I belong to all of these religions. Acha, so Malik Amin Sahar, dear Babaji, you are speaking a truth about CIA and other satanic agencies who work against Islamic countries and terrorism. After this, do you feel safe from their revenge? Yes, I feel safe because I believe in God and the protection of God. So we don't need to fear these satanic forces. All right. I think I'll have to end now. Let me just see. Yes, it is over 1 hour. So I will try to go through. I think that we've come to most of the questions. But we will see you 5 days from today. That will be Monday evening at 6 p.m. in California. Next Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. in Pakistan. 7:30 a.m. in India. I look forward to seeing you then. And thank you all very much for your questions. And Parth Sachdevji, namaste to you also. I hope that we can learn to be friendly with each other and discuss in a friendly way. And even if we call each other fools, let us try to understand the truth and what is foolishness and what is intelligence. I believe that we cannot blindly follow what our governments say or what the mass media says. We have to be very sharp to see the truth behind that propaganda. All right, thank you very, very much. And we will continue next week investigating how world peace may be established without Armageddon, without need for a huge military confrontation, a huge nuclear conflagration, an event that will kill more than half the population of the world. We want to avoid that, and God willing, peace will be established without such suffering. Thank you all very much. Peace be with you. May God protect us all.